So I thought I'd make this video. Hopefully the battery's not going to die because it has 1% on there. So it's in my room, fixing to go to bed and get ready for this orientation tomorrow. I'm probably going to get about 6 hours, 7 hours of sleep. But I've been resting all day, just kind of trying to regulate my system to go from morning to night to kind of stay alert. I particularly don't like staying up late like that erratically because it's sort of it becomes sort of animated or cartoonish, imaginative world when I stay up too long. Even though physically I may be able to, it kind of drives you to a cookie mentality, or at least it does to me. And sometimes that can be enjoyable, but it's not healthy. Anyway, so I'm trying to regulate that, and I have to go back to night shift. But I was thinking of something that was really important here. I'm watching this boxing match, Golden Gloves. Thinking of my old friend Robert, who died a long time ago. You remember he showed a video. But anyway, I was, thinking of something that was, crucially important. And I thought, I remember my mother was standing over the stove, and like my mother would sort of go into like a lot of the time the same way that I do, is that you just kind of either not talk to yourself, but you're just into your own thing, and you start expressing yourself in sort of mild tones to yourself, because either you feel like you can't speak to anyone else, or it's just a way to purge those emotions to why you did what you did and how you feel about the situation to that individual. And I want to, because I remember walking into the kitchen, and these are very slight, these are very slices and small slices of circumstances to why it conditioned me to believe, through either assumption and because she doesn't want to tell me, because I have to make an observation and I have to try to pick up and read that person. And a lot of people don't do that with their mothers. So when I talk about that, they don't understand that, because when you ever been around a foreign immigrant that doesn't know how to read or write, or someone that's from a foreign country, been a lot of trauma, and they're focused on always trying to survive on this particular playing field, it's very different. Most domestic mothers in the United States know English and either steal money because they want to be lazy or want to freeload, or it could be mental disorders. But it's very different. It's just kind of like the majority of people that really believe deeply in religious beliefs or in God tend to be people that are poor. They're not billionaires and millionaires. They're not deeply very religious people. They may do a lot of good, but they're not religious. Well, they just go into the category Christianity, Catholicism beliefs, because there's, Catholicism is like Baptist, Methodist, all these different Catholicism beliefs, but they're pretty much all the same. At least that's my understanding. Well, most of them that have a lot of wealth to them, there's a lot of them, a lot of wealthy people, and the majority, in my opinion, like if you go to a poor church, it's very fucking different than if you ever go to a rich church. Or you go to a church that has all kinds of fancy shit, it becomes more of a show than it does anything else. When you go to and I say this because I've been to a lot of poor churches, and not a lot, but a number of them. And with one of the poorest churches I had ever went to was with Robert Senior Zarate. And Robert Senior Zarate, and I was really thinking, I just saw this other guy. He was a really great guy, and I remember him taking me to church a long time ago. But we went to the church in the hood, and his dad only preferred to go to the church in the hood. He didn't want to go into the Carrollton. It was like this poor area, and it was an old cliff. And when you walked in there, this church was like, it was like an old church. It was like from like the 50s and 60s. Like they had a basement. And when you went to the basement, you could tell all the furniture and shit was from like the 50s. Like that church was probably built during the 50s or 60s during that time. But you could tell it was run down. Paint is chipping off the wall. and just the way that it was in a poor neighborhood. And you go to a lot of places like this, and the belief system is a lot more. It's a lot more of a built on a relationship toward that belief, as opposed to people that go to a lot of churches that are, these mega churches and all this money and entertainment, and they get on stage and all this other shit. It's particularly very different because it puts it more into the individual. For those that understand going to a poor church, you know what I'm talking about. You know what that really is, because you really don't have any else to go to. But so in this particular situation, I say this because I'm thinking of my mother. So I guess I kind of rabbit trailed there, but I walk by, I'm in the kitchen, and I'm with my mother, speaking to her, and I notice that she's sort of doing this. And she's cooking, right? So, she's, my mother is, let's see, okay, my mother's actually cooking, okay? So when she's cooking, we'll just say, this is, a spoon, and she does this, and she's like this, just, and I'm where that camera is, about that same distance, and I'm walking to my room, walking to throw the trash, walking to go do something else. And I know she's doing this, and she goes, and you could tell that she's sort of thinking to herself, and she's just kind of in her own world, cooking meals or whatever, and does this, and she goes. And you can tell that she's thinking about what she's doing. You can tell that when I look, I'm not about, I want to say that this is what I remember. I saw her, I do remember her giving this facial expression as this. She goes like this. But she wasn't looking at me. She was talking to herself, but she's thinking about that little girl. That's why she probably would have turned that way. But when she was doing her like making a soup or something, I don't remember. This is what I don't remember. I want to say that I think she does either this, like and doing that. So this is one of the reasons that this is, to me, this is one of the reasons that I believe. This is one of the reasons that I believe that my sister was murdered. In fact, I feel very confident about saying that. You can't, unless you have unhealthy, what do they call, ovaries to make babies, uterus, ovaries to make, the seed goes into the tube and all this other stuff, the physical anatomy. If you have that very healthy, which my mother had to have had, having two sets of twins, not just one, not just, me, Frankie, Julian, not just to have 3 kids, until I found out later, she had 2 sets of identical twins. Now, I don't know scientifically, whoever can look this up, I'm sure they can. Scientifically, they can't. I remember watching this story about twins, that they understand how twins are formed, like how twins are formed, like inside the eggs, and they split and divide, and they, somehow twins are born. They understand that physical anatomy, but they said that they don't understand why there's a certain development that doesn't make sense, that why there's 2 eggs that show up, the reason why that dividing happens. There was something about the making of twins that they said that was very, to me it sounded magical. It sounded sort of godlike, like they couldn't figure out something why the twins are actually developed. Now, even if you can't figure that out, that that's a very healthy, uterus and ovaries. That has to be very healthy and more healthy than most people, because now you had 2 sets of identical twins, and the children are both are very healthy. Marco weighed like 9 pounds. I was the biggest kid I weighed more than Julian at birth. I weighed more than Frankie, but Marco weighed more than me. Marco weighed at birth something like 8.5 pounds or 9 pounds, which is fucking giant for a baby. Both Marco had twins. Those are two sets of twins, and they're big kids. They're not small. Julian, he's shorter than I am, but he's still twins. So I think it's important for me to say this. Because this is why I would believe that in order to have a little girl that is deformed, another form of that is mutant. Frankie's the one I remember telling me. He said that's another word for mutant. It's a mutation. He learned that, I remember, a mongoloid, mutant, retarded, Down syndrome. There's various words that are more respectable and other sort of side words that are reference to that. So that's the story to the situation. I know that she was. I know, and I say this. That's what I believe, because how my mother behaved and how she was treated by so many different people. When you have people that are poisoning me and her in two separate occasions, that is a behavior that is because of the circumstances that you're in. The same way that the circumstances that I am in life, and how so many people attacked me, Gary Gwynn, Mike Standish, certain police officers, they know that all this attention, so there's always going to be more aggression. It's just kind of like, it's a prejudice act. It's a prejudice. It could be very different. Oh, you're going to get more money than me. Oh no, you're going to ruin the white race. No, I got to protect the white race. Whatever that prejudice moment is the reason why, and it doesn't change the fact that you're still being marked. What happens is they're baiting you. They're putting a piece of meat on me. I don't even know that I'm carrying it, and then they throw me in a pit of alligators. They throw me in a pool of piranhas, and I don't even know where the fuck the piece of meat is, nor do I have any idea why the fuck these piranhas are all fucking chewing at me. So that doesn't change the circumstances of what that is. So when you understand that my mother's being persecuted, oh, she's an old man trying to get his money, oh, he's gay, it's okay. Now we got to give him to her. Now we got to give her to him and make sure she behaves. So then they put pressure on him because it's a homosexual type of thing of honoring Raymond Palomo. So it's like, you see how we unite, you see how and you're guttering my mother. But it was a mutual relationship between my mother and father and an agreement. But that's a social conditioning that even comes even more and deeper that I don't understand the psychologists could do and break down even more. But I think it's important for me to say this because there were so many people throughout my mother's life that I was a part of in front of her and how people behaved. There was, and not just that, the way that we walked into Mervyn's when I was a kid, and they scold my mother with words like and treat her like shit because she was a Mexican wetbag going into a Mervyn's buying some toys or some blankets for her kids. Yet she didn't know how to speak very good English, and she was just doing it for her children. And you'd have these white women that treat her like shit. And I remember that. I remember a couple times my mother crying. He was like, "I'm just buying things for my kids. What the fuck? I'm not your white skin. I don't get this white treatment, motherfucker." But she didn't say that. And she was just like always hurt. She was just, and it was always a constant basis of this when I was a kid. So I think it's very important because, you're talking about the early 90s to late 80s. You're not going to understand that. So, just like my father who survived during his period of time. But I think it's very important for me to make these discussions because this also includes why I would have been able to understand why somebody would have went after my mother and tried to kill the child, because it would have been it's a technique that people do for various different types of reason. Poison is a very effective way not to get caught and to harm somebody and put them in their place. And for the professionals that understand what that is, it's an effective tool. It's very effective. And the reason I say that is because the person that's doing this knows that they're going to kill the baby. That's what they're going to do. That's the reason why they're doing it, because they know that you're going to put that dead body out of your body. Once you put that dead body out of your body, it's going to incinerate into your brain, into your body for the rest of your life, and it puts you right there where I told you. You see how Ken Cooper works in the police department? So it's just not how I do it. It's just police department, troubles too. But I think it's important because I understand that very well. So when I kind of get that, I'm not perfect in anything. I'm sort of drawing the dry erase board. When I put that sort of implementing the ideas of the situation to how my mother was being treated by so many different types of behaviors, this behavior toward my mother is always the same toward people. It's dark and negative. Dark, malicious, and envy and jealous. You're wetback, you're Mexican, you're not American, all this other shit. My mother never bragged or told people that my father was a World War II veteran and the first graduate from university. My mother, I don't ever hardly told people about my father being my mother knew about it, but it wasn't a discussion of bragging. It wasn't in our family. Like, she didn't go off and tell all our family members, "Oh yeah, Ray went to college and he went to become a nurse." He knew, and that was the situation, but it was his past. We were already, my mother and my father who raised me, already were moving forward in life. Even though my dad had bitter moments, it was about surviving. So I think it's important for me to say this because these elements come from very different specific characters. These characters are not only because doing it for Miguel, but they're doing it for Diana. No, now they're doing it over here because of Raymond Palomo. No, that's the reason we survive, because of LBGT community. There's a very clear understanding of why that works, but there's a clear understanding that someone had to have come along toward my mother that had to have poisoned her. It could have been a straight woman. Could have been somebody that was absolutely angry or a Mexican, because my dad was very defensive of my mother. Even though my father wanted his own relation. He was very, very much about himself. You weren't going to fucking take his shit away from him. He wanted a family. He was going to put his family first. And that's the way that it went. It's a different way of thinking, because you don't come across these types of characters very often. This type of lifestyle, this type of mentality usually comes from people from a different era of time and from a different understanding of life. It's a very different understanding of what life is. It's the same thing, like you can see how a lot of there's a lot of, they say white people, it's because they're used to luxury and free open doors and whatever the fuck. There's a lot of bad doors that open to that, but that's part of the luxury shit that you get. It comes much more easier. You wouldn't understand that, and it goes also into black people, and you can understand how why black people, so much of them can almost take you to prison a lot more easier. It's like black suicide is not a black thing. Black people don't commit suicide. It's more Mexican, all populations, but black people, it's just, for some reason, it's not in them, even though they're majority that end up suffering so much. So they can endure quite a bit. So I think it's important for me to say this because, in these circumstances of this way of surviving, I can relate to all the way my mother was treated throughout her life by so many different people, that there had to have been so many people. I remember how my dad's, Raymond Palomo's mother, taught my mother how to cook, and it was just a different time. I feel very confident. I'm not trying to play psychic. It's just too much of a common sense to think that someone didn't do this on purpose. That someone had to have done this on purpose. And the person that probably did it, they're probably not even alive anymore. They're long been dead. They've been dead probably for a very long time. Whoever it was, God forbid, it was somebody that came along. Could have been a work environment. Maybe, God forbids, it's something nobody knows anything that, say somebody, kicked my mother. Somebody beat the shit out of my mother. No one knew about it. Someone beat the shit out of my mother, and beat the fuck out of the baby and kicked her in her stomach and killed the baby, or nearly killed the baby. Because people were so envious of getting money and getting job opportunities during that time. When you see a Mexican fragile person that does not have any money, does not have anything, it was so accommodated and used to. It's the same way that a lot of these parasitical motherfuckers did after me. Once they got done and they got old, they sent their kids to go clean up and wipe shit off the goddamn ground. And I didn't want to allow that to happen. I was going to send their kids to the funeral home and then let their parents watch. No, you die and you watch again. And you get to see that. So, you know, more valuable there, isn't it? So I think it's, you know, important for me to make at least this information to whatever the psychologists are. I'm trying my best to try to talk. I feel very foggy-minded most of the time now that I'm making these videos because it's very unclear. They're shooting so many electronic devices. They do so many fucking different things. And it's sort of a desperation to the higher creator, or God, that I'm at least trying. And whatever information, I can never express this enough. Sarah Cooper dressed in a costume over at work and doing this to my mother again, and you feeling sympathy for it, it's not going to change about what's happened. I can never express the forfeiting defeat of what this has done because they used my mother's twin. I didn't know. It's just, oh, this and oh, that, oh, this and that, oh, this and this and this, and keep going and this and that and this and that, and keep going and this and that. Time runs out. It was with that very intention. I am clear, very minded against what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to come at you with every piece of ammunition with a suicide intention to end it that way. That's what these people were doing. I know clear what this action is going to do. I feel envious. I hate you because of what you have. This is not about love, sharing, or equally dividing. This is a very clear understanding of what these people are doing. And I have no fucking idea what is on the fucking table. You know, in my higher perspective of it, it had to have been something I don't understand at the higher levels of intelligence that had to do with political power. Why I got raped with a transgender and all this other shit that had happened. There's no fucking reason. You know, that's why. There's something that I just don't understand that why that had to have happened, and it wasn't God. It was a person and a group of people that knew what was going to happen, what was going to happen. There was no fucking reason. You have too much at the values of human life that could have been used later down the road. Richard, John, you know, you're fighting for the American. There had to have been something that it's out of my element to understand. But I know that it was not God. It was not no holy God. That's for sure. That reason, it was intentionally done so they could use, you know, the holy God perception or holy God idea to think that's how they're going to use a wash rag, and that's what it does affect if it works. You understand? These are geniuses. They know how to wipe and kill. Just as you shoot somebody in the head and you kill them, there's nothing you can come back that from. That's it. That is okay. That's it. That's it. That's done. When that's done, there's nothing repaired. Nothing. That all eternity existence for that existence of that individual is gone. There's nothing. You can live your fantasies all you want afterwards. That is not going to change what the fuck perceptions. You think he's in heaven or hell. You think he's crossed over or learned his lessons. Ain't going to change anything. That's a done deal. Well, these geniuses know exactly how to do that mechanisms onto me and what is happening with these circumstances. So I think it's important for me to say this because, you know, there was just, you know, it's very upsetting. I lost my train of thought where I was trying to get with this, and I think they're just dumbing me down. But, you know, sticking to my mother's, you know, particular type of situation, yeah, she was murdered. You know, I know that she was someone. I don't believe the person that actually did this are alive anymore. At least most of them. You know, I don't know my mother. Hopefully, my mother was able to be healthy enough to tell all the story, every fucking detail. Tell me everything you fucking know, everything ever happened. So the psychologist can sort it all out. So once they do this with my mother, you know, who knows? It's like I saw a woman with a black eye one day coming into work a couple days ago, or 2 days ago. Maybe that's a sign to show and sort of cinemating these sort of sensations to understand and like my AIDS and my HIV, the same way that understanding starts to happen and it eases everything. So once you do that, it's just to understand that, yeah, someone beat the fuck out of my mother and, you know, killed a child or poisoned her. Could mean various different types of reasons, or it can make an intentional, various different types of directional understandings to make it E. And so, in this particular discussion, I think it's important. You know, I just because I'm very understanding how she was treated by so many different people, the way that people looked at her, you know, the way people acted, the way Sarah acted, the way Ken acted, you know, the way my mom, you know, looked over and she said, "Oh yeah, he's a twin," you know, and Ken Cooper looking at my mother like, "Oh, that's what you want to do, huh?" You know, and I remember that. I was a little child and Ken wouldn't talk to my mother. It wasn't nothing good. Whatever it doesn't going to change anything. Barack Obama and the president got what the fuck they want. I know exactly what they did, and they're going to get what they want in the end, and they're going to get everything. There's no hope no more. You're going to have to give up. If you're watching this video, Michaela, you're going to have to give up. It's not going to, whatever's happened. I can tell you this. You're not. They did that on purpose. They knew the stages and platforms and people. No, they're feeding me with this fame, garbage shit. It has very little value to it. It doesn't have a value other than more political power, and it's genius and laid. You're not going to do anything. You're going to have to surrender to the Cooper family, and they're not going to go out and do them. I mean, they know what they're doing. And I'm saying this out of the safety. Michaela also is just save your own life. It's save whatever you can and retain, because you're not. It's done, and they're gonna keep making excuses and layering it down the road, and you can't go back anymore. When I talk to so many old people, you know, nobody remembers their 20s. Nobody remembers, and it's hard. I could make a whole class on that shit, on discussions, and it's just not gonna work. They knew what they did, and they gave it to them anyway. It's so ridiculously, intentionally done, with the intentions just to do harm to me. That's all it was. They're wiping up, they're fizzling the emotions of the dead little girl using Ken Cooper's look-alike, Ken Cooper's actions, relating the emotions back and forth by everyone that looks exactly like someone that I know, and then mocking every single behavior, whether it's my father, Ken, or my mother, or all these different types of people, and they do that. It's a very profound on the psychology that they do, but it doesn't change the afterlife and how those elements participate in that. But as far as I have to say, in those particular type of situations, save your own life. You know, Michaela, you know, whatever it is, you're not. There are too many of them. You know, one of the things I also wanted to discuss is Sarah Cooper once told me, I was on the phone, and she said this more than once, Kenneth told me this, and then Sarah told me after. He goes, "Oh yeah, you know Madison, which is the girl that I saw. You know, I didn't know, but that's like Ken Cooper's mistress. I mean, that isn't Ken Cooper's daughter, transgender daughter, the one he had. No, that's Ken Cooper's daughter. That's from a mistress, from someone else. So I think it's important for me to say this because after I left, like, I don't know, it was like a year after or something, Madison was 16 years old. Madison she said that she had a kid with that blonde hair white guy. But when I went over, this is how the relationship between. She said that she had a kid with that guy. And she was like 17. She was under 18 years old when she had a baby with that guy. But I don't think that kid was straight. I don't think he might have been, but I don't think he was. I'd seen him once or twice. That was it. But I think it was important for me to say this because, you know, I don't think he was, because I remember that, you know, there was a lot of tension, sexual arousal between me and Madison. Like, you could tell that. I'll go into more discussion in this. But what happened was is that a year and a half later, a year or something, she said she had a kid, but you know what she was really telling me and trying to do investigation about? Michaela, I think, had a child with someone that was connected to Richard Murphy and that family. Because why are you saying, oh yeah, you know Madison? Yeah, and the way that Sarah Cooper said it is like this. Yeah, you know, like she was like distant talking in the way that she was talking. She wasn't very connected to the relationship of that child with some other young kid. It was like, you know that Madison's, that guy you saw, she had a kid with him. Like you could tell that she was doing that. So this has something to do with Michaela having had a child with someone that could have been someone that I knew, unless she was talking about my mother. And I say this because when I was 35 years old, before I got on disability, I was at the Magic Time Machine, and Michaela sat across the table from a guy that had all blonde hair, and he looked a lot like this guy. But they didn't particularly look like they were bonded toward one another. They particularly didn't look very close. So I think it's important. And as far as Madison, you know, they had to have cameras and all this other shit. I know what was going on. It was kind of weird because when you're young, when you're 16 years old, compared to like a 21-year-old man, those are the highest peaks of sexual prime in your physical existence that you're going to collide together in the most, you know, physical peaks of sensation at the highest levels. So I think it's important for me to make that discussion because Kenneth knew. I mean, it was you could feel the vibes so heavily, and I tried not to make eye contact because, you know, I just tried not to. At that time, you got to understand that I think that she's related to me, and I just didn't think that she thought it was okay because she was like a second cousin or something, and I was just like, you know, I was like, no incest, like, no, because I told Kenneth this, and Kenneth got a little upset about it because he saw because she was causing a lot of trouble in the house or whatever. But anyway, I made eye contact, and it's difficult because I'm not that young person anymore, and she's not that young person. Whatever fairy tales it is now, yada yada, it's all yada yada now. So, but at that moment in time, she's a beautiful girl, a very beautiful girl, very prime. But I just acknowledged, and I made it as professional as I could, and I made it directed in a way that was just like to make an awareness of the family that I was there. That, you know, I know how to, you know, say, yeah, hey, you know, you're either too young, or hey, you know, we're relatives, we're bloodline. This is incest. This is not okay, because there are people's sexual peak are so fucking high, they'll fuck their sister, you know. But but I think it's important. I wasn't very rude to her, very nice, but I could tell, you know, without a doubt, and I had left a very heavy impression. But I made it, you know, very clear and professional. Like, I wasn't aggressive or anything. Just, I made it so that there was a distance that she would sort of try to understand, because I could see how Kenneth, like, it's something that straight people we have. I'm not gonna lie, you know, I was saying she's a very attractive girl. She's a very beautiful girl, and, you know, at the peak is, you know, what goes through a young man's head, and what you're thinking of her vagina, and you're thinking of sex, both ends are the peakest. You know, that couldn't be more of a peak during the era, a time of life, and an individual human being's life, especially when you're both healthy and strong, and good genetics, beards, and, you know, good height, you know, 5'11" or above, you know, physical or symmetry faces, you know, beautiful. So I think it's important for me to make a video about this. So I made that separation because I took the initiative of that, because I knew that she was peaking her sex, like, prime, like, you could just tell, like, peaking. Like some people have an ability to peak. You can't. People, porn stars, will tell you those stories. But yeah. So I thought I'd make a video on this. I made that intention, and to sort of make it as peaceful as I could, because I knew it wasn't her fault. Or at least I didn't feel like it was. Because there's a lot of 16-year-old girls. 16-year-old girls get around, you hear all this story all the time. 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, they get around older men, like in their 20s, and they peak sexually, or they peak maturity for some reason. If it's not just sex, they peak in maturity. Like, not women always peak maturity when they're young, but I'm talking about like they're all ready for a family, and they're built like my mother was, or some shit. Like you know what I'm talking about. Those the people that understand that, and it's through the beginning of time. But I did make that sort of acknowledgement to, like, how you doing? Like, it was, to sort of make it ease that way. So anyway, because I sort of thought to myself, this is incest. This is no, this is incest. It's nasty. That's no. But yeah, I thought I'd make a video and discuss a few different topics. You make of what it is. I could never express enough. There's so many technical things, Michaela. If you watch these videos, there's so much shit that's going on in my environment that's in support of Sarah and Ken, making them heroes. My mother's a garbage can. My mother's a wash rag. My mother didn't give me things. No, they're the ones that gave it to my mother that gave me. And it's new understanding. Well, beat me, suppress it, then move me back up, then move me back down. Then it's like, oh, look, a surprise, and introduce something new into the environment. Oh, introduce relaxation. Oh, comfort. Okay, now put pressure. They do all these different types of correlating things that even the things that they don't control doesn't going to change anything of this sort of carvings of everything, of many of the outputs of what ultimately this is supposed to be directed to, with that intention to say, Kenneth Cooper and the gay community and we, the white supremacy, won for this shit. It's not going to change anything. It's not. It's the best way is to run for it. Run to save your own life, because you'll die in this firefight. You're not gonna win. It's not about, like, I wouldn't say necessarily winning. It's about save yourself, picking up the scraps, because it's more likely they're smarter than you. No, it's more like they are smarter than you. That's for sure. More tactical. And we're early enough to do it before you can make any firepower to it. It's not going to change. It's about picking up the scraps and moving from that situation, because it shouldn't have happened this way, but it happened with that intentions by the superiors. Keep yourself safe, and then pick up the remains from what's left. That's the best thing that I can say. Because it's good to have a source of spiritual belief in God in your life. You have to, especially in the circumstances. Even if you got put in those circumstances for those very intentional reasons, it is best to do that. A lot of the people that are always looking for gain and more money and more this and more that, the reason they want these types of things is because they don't understand. Like, they never went to fucking the Bible and listened to the Bible and, the different churches, and really strictly listened to everything that you do and lived your life like this. Like a lot of the times that I had done for a period of time when I was very young, going to church. And then you sort of evolve and you understand these types of things. So even when you do drugs, you know that you're doing bad, but you know how to do it in sort of a very constructive way, if that makes any type of sense. Experimental. A lot of people don't do that. But when you sort of carry these types of things and try to survive, so I think it's important for me to make this discussion, because it probably fits more into the program of everything that's going on, especially in the U.S. Under circumstances, it's best fitting to keep you safe, healthy, and the remains of what's left, and to move forward. It always falls on me more than anything else. It's not going to change any of this shit. And I'm terminal. We're all terminal. We're all going to fucking die. Some of us are going to die sooner than others. Some won't. Some will live to be 80 years old, and lived very pig-infested lives. They weren't very good. They did very little shit. They did a lot of bullshit throughout their fucking entire life, while people picked up the scraps and then died later, and didn't get a lot of good things in life. So, if you go to a poor church, you know what I'm talking about. Go to a poor church. You'll understand that a little bit better, much more better in life, and the kind of people that go there. I'll make some other discussions and video. I gotta go and get to class. I gotta go to sleep.